Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. I didn't think it was going to happen. In fact, I predicted that the losing candidate in Pennsylvania's gubernatorial race, Doug Mastriano, was not going to concede. He would not. Really? Sore loser? I proven wrong. Doug Mastriano finally conceded to Josh Shapiro after being thumped by 14 points on election day, and it only took him nearly a week to do it. So I stand corrected, and I admit when I'm wrong. He came forth almost a week after his thumping, and came forth and conceded. And you know what? Nobody cared. Shapiro was asked, didn't care. And I think that's the right response. I mean, you got to do the right thing at the right time. That's simple. Now, everybody was looking today to see if the Donald was going to show up for the January 6th deposition. The next step there didn't happen. I understand. There was a subpoena last month, the deposition. Trump failed to appear. And are you surprised? The answer, clearly no. But what Trump did do today, went on the little Twitter wannabe, and look, at the rate that Elon Musk is breaking Twitter, Truth Social may actually be the next big thing. Way to go, Elon. But he, I guess he truthed, and a whole bunch of people retruthed Donald Trump's statement. Hopefully tomorrow will turn out to be one of the most important days in the history of our country. And my mind immediately went, what, is Merrick Garland going to finally indict you? No, and what the thought I believe is tomorrow he's going to introduce himself as a candidate. Maybe he's going to come down an escalator. Maybe I'm trying to find what's the big grand thing. You know, he's going to jump out of a cake. I don't know. He's a showman. There will be something. There will be a grand display, an entrance. It will make the diminished go ooh, and the rest of us will be horrified. Now, I keep saying, look, he's got to run, and he's got to be soundly defeated. This is where Republicans have to find their courage. Will they? Don't know. But this last election hopefully will give them, hopefully give the rest of us another one of those great Republican autopsies. You remember, was it 2012 when they did the autopsy and they went through all the things they had to do and then did none of them? In fact, doubled down on all of the things they did wrong, which has led us to, where we are right now. And you look at, last Tuesday's Democrats, should have gotten thumped. History was not on the Democrat side, but yet they're going to keep the Senate and increase it. There's still a chance, very, very marginal chance, that they maybe hang on to the House, although I doubt it. It's one of these moments where you go, in looking at what happened Tuesday, you got to understand, Roe was a huge part of it. All of the projection by the F channel and by all the politicians, red waves coming, was purely projection. It was Trump. It was Trumpian in its ridiculousness. And they were out there pushing that, knowing that there was this thing called angry women, and they went to the polls. Now, you can go, that's all it was. No, it's a lot of things. There's a lot of anger. Redistricting played a big part of it. COVID had some of it. There's just bad strategy by Republicans. Also, come on, someone like Mastriano running for governor? Seriously? Bad candidates do matter. And this is one of those things where you can go, it's all about Roe. No, it's about all of that. And understand, this Biden, rightfully so, made this election about democracy and saving democracy. It's not safe now still. The next 2 years, there's going to be another one of these election things in 2 years. Another important election. And it will be billed, just like this one was, as the most important ever because we're still going to have this threat. I was listening to a book on tape where the guy was talking about the 1950s. And he was saying, look, the two parties were not far off. If you look at the Republican platform from 1956, it's actually more liberal than the Democratic platform today in their support for labor unions, in their support for government intervention in the Farm Bill and Social Security and all of these things that everybody, society agreed on, both parties agreed on. And again, as I keep saying, it comes back to us. This is why you, me, us, the working people of this country, we got to come back to somewhere near the, in between the curbs, get into the middle of the road there, so to speak. Because until we say this is the country we are, you're going to continue to have these extremes. People like Trump, who is going to sell you the shiny thing, and then at the last minute, Lucy you every single day by yanking it away. Because none of the promises came true. None of that. People would tell me, well, I was doing so much better then. Yeah, the economy was good. But he didn't build that. The other guy did. He inherited a very good economy and growing economy. Obama handed him a good economy. He heated it up, by the way, with massive deficit spending, things that Republicans tell us we're against, but he did that. So there should be a giant sign of, yeah, Trump did that. All of the other stuff, not so much. And this is one of these moments where, yeah, enjoy the victory, but danger on the horizon. And part of that is Donald Trump. Part of that is a Republican-led House. Now, I want Trump to run. I'm still in this place where the only logical conclusion to tomorrow him coming out and saying, I'm a candidate and staking that flag in the ground is he's expecting an indictment any day. He's expecting Merrick Garland to actually do something any day now. It's the only thing that makes sense, given the fact that once you declare your candidacy, there's no more grift. There's no more ripping off people. There's no more selling snake oil. There's no more of that. There's no more selling access. So it's going to be interesting. Now, Republicans have already told us when they take the House, and it looks like they may, investigations. They're going after Hunter Biden. Yeah, they're going to. Hello, not a shock at all. And the thing that's interesting is you see media reports of how Republicans quietly, and I love how these reports come out, Republican leadership quietly, cringing as, the announcement of Trump and Trumpism continuing because they know what he's done. I mean, the latest YouGov poll has got DeSantis ahead of Trump, saying that, they prefer DeSantis over, or I'm sorry, DeSanctimonious, which is hysterical. They prefer DeSantis over Trump, 42-35, which is kind of a little crack in the armor, but it's going to laser focus Trump on just destroying DeSantis. And the fun of all this is going to be going forward is watching Donald Trump destroy the Republican Party, and then watching who his lackeys are going to be. And I point to Ohio. In Ohio, I'm so disappointed in you. You had a chance to get a really good guy as a senator, and you chose, J.D. Vance. He has written over at the American Conservative that he writes, quote, "Our party has one major asset, contra-conventional wisdom, to rally these voters, President Donald Trump. Now more than ever, our party needs President Trump's leadership to turn these voters out and suffer for his absence from the stage." And as I'm reading this, all I keep hearing is as he's literally kissing his behind. I'm imagining him just wiping his nose and the brown dripping off. Because, wow, JD, hide it a little bit, buddy. A little bit. Just saying. But I want to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Now, also interesting, who's going to be the next speaker? Matt Gaetz, the forehead, hath come out and said he will not vote for Kevin McCarthy, which means McCarthy's going to have kind of no matter what McCarthy does, he's screwed. And I think that's great. It's great because he's not been great. He's not been good for this country. Andy Biggs, the Republican from Arizona, he evidently is going to throw his name in. Long shot, not going to happen, but going to cause a rift. So again, what's going to happen? Republicans are going to eat themselves because it's all they know how to do. And McCarthy, whether he gets it or not, basically screwed. If he doesn't get it, well, sorry, you lost out. If he does get it, he's going to have to deal with the children. He's going to have to deal with the children. So give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. We'll take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Jerry sent me an email during the break musing about a Speaker McCarthy, basically saying he is, in non-FCC compliant language, saying he's is what it is. And I don't disagree with Jerry. I think he's screwed no matter what he does. He threw himself out there. He wants to be the speaker, and he's going to inherit the children. And the children, they're going to disappoint. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are we doing today?
We're doing good. I was laughing along with Carol, by the way. My husband and I plan on stocking up on the popcorn, especially after we saw Pence's interview tonight with ABC News, because we've come to the conclusion it's going to get real interesting. We're going to have Trump. We know Abbott's going to throw his hat in the ring along with DeSantis. And then poor old Mike Pence in the background. So it's going to be real interesting watching that going on. And then, the Speaker of the House thing, it's going to be real interesting. I told my husband, well, if nothing else, we can be amused.
And I think Ted Cruz will throw his name in there because why not? He needs to have his wife called ugly again, and then, again, back to the kissing that they do.
Absolutely.
It's going to be an interesting time. All the while, this is where I keep coming back to there's some sanity here. There's an adult in the room, and his name's Joe Biden. We're going to keep doing work. We're going to keep moving forward. We're going to keep doing the things that need to be done because no matter what, the Republicans can't undo the accomplishments of this administration, the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act. They can't undo that. And that's what is going to move us forward. And that I do believe in 2 years, people are going to look back at it and go, wow, that was important. So for me, have your clown car, your cavalcade of crazy, do everything that you need to do to get it out of your system. But at the end of the day, there's an adult in charge. and hopefully we're going to be moving the country forward.
Well, I'm thinking that the Republican Party is going to be a little bit in disarray. I'm trying to be nice.
You think?
Yes. Already Trump's going after DeSantis. And
you mean DeSanctimonious?
Yes, him. So it's going to be real interesting, needless to say. And I'm just, my husband and I tonight, we're just shaking our head, throwing out various scenarios to each other of the forthcoming festivities for the Republican Party. And I'm going, I hope that they put the, oh, darn it. So my mind goes blank. When they go out there and they toss things back and forth at each other, the candidates,
the debates?
My mind's blank. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, you think there's going to be a debate? You think these people are going to debate?
Oh, I hope they do, because that is going to be so fun. I mean, that's going to be like, really, get out the popcorn.
Yeah. No, it will be a giant S show. There will be a show. And look, here's the thing, and this is where the Republicans do have, Republican candidates do have a concern, because Trump is really good at this. I hate to give him credit, but he is good at wreaking havoc. He is good at causing chaos. He is good at burning things down, and the Republican Party is what he is burning down right now. Eventually, democracy as a whole, but right now, the Republican Party is on fire.
Oh, it is, and it's going to be real interesting, because, you can just picture in your mind, you got Mike Pence sitting there, he's trying to be all the reverend,
yeah.
And then DeSantis is trying to be Trump 2.0, and Abbott over there, I don't think he's quite as snarky as DeSantis, and then, of course, Trump on steroids himself, so it should be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Pence is going to stand up to the assault, but Pence is not. He's not going to weather the attacks. He's not going to weather the back and forth. He's not. I don't think he's quick enough. I don't think he's assertive enough. I mean, he may surprise me, but I just don't. Without Mother by his side, I'm not sure where he's going to go.
Well, that's what my husband said. My husband said, well, maybe he'll have Mother go out
there you go.
And give him what for. But you have a good evening.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate it. No, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you got someone like Mike Pence coming out and saying, Trump made him less safe. This is the reality of the moment. And even you've got Pence, who was a yes man all during, he was doing the all during the presidency as well. You've got him coming out and saying that, Trump put him in danger. Said Trump's words were reckless. They endangered him. They endangered his family. They endangered everyone at the Capitol on January 6th. And yet today, over at the Truth Social, what does Trump re-truth or truth out or whatever it is they do? What is it? Millions of people stood by me on January 6th, 2021. I told you when it happened. Eventually, they're going to spin this around to where it's patriotism and they were good, God-fearing Christian folks marching for... They're going to spin this. And the important thing is that no one allows it to happen. That it doesn't... They don't get to rewrite history this time. This is the point. And this is where we need to make sure that laser focus. And the January 6th committee, they better get their report done, and they better get it out soon. And we better be hammering on this for the next 2 years to remind people of what happened on that day. It's that simple. Let's quick go to the phones. We got Kurt from Tucson, Arizona on line 3. Kurt, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, Rick. We're celebrating, brother.
Outstanding.
I remember us having like a conversation like 2 months ago when we were concerned about both of our states going fascist.
Yep.
And Katie Hobbs won. And that is like, it's just awesome.
No, it is, and it's because of folks like you. I mean, I've known over the last year, you've been doing tons of phone banking all across the country. It's because people have said we're not going to allow this, and we can't stop this now, Kurt. We've now got to engage with engage in our democratic process and demand that sanity rule the day. And look, I'm saying, look, reach out to if there are any sane Republicans left, we've got to reach out to them and bring them back to the middle of the road, and begin to agree upon the framework of this country again.
One of the things we did down here, Rick, was in like the last month and a half of the election, we went and canvassed in the like Trump country of Arizona, which is all Republican, and we mainly went there for the independents because there's more independents in Arizona than there is Democrats and Republicans, but we're doing this whole campaign down here on rights to nature, and even the Republicans in this state, because we got the water issue and it kind of works for that, and they're all on board with that. And it's just talking to them, instead of getting in this big old fight about, like, you don't want to talk to them about abortions because it turns into a fight.
Yep.
And it's things that we can agree on. I mean, because water, it's not a Republican, it's not Democrat.
Yeah, you're kind of going to need that.
We all have to have it.
Yep, kind of going to need it.
Yeah, and we got, our agriculture here. I spent a lot of times going to the farms here in Arizona, and the farmers are struggling, and, we're going to see some really, we think we got inflation now. It's going to be ugly next year. I mean, because the crops are not good, and, a lot of these farms had to sell off their beef stock and stuff to survive. And so the thing is, Rick, like, how do you replace that, because it takes a few years to get those, the beef cows back in stock, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we could see some food shortages, I think, that we haven't been expecting.
Yeah, but I understand they're working on that, and there are people who are attempting to figure this out, and we have to. Right. This is where the Biden administration, doing the job, doing the work, has to figure this out. Because look, we hit inflation like we've had the last couple of years. Over the next 2 years, 2024 is not going to be hard to figure out where we're going to go. There's a little breath of air.
Right.
We've got an opportunity to right the ship. The supply chain will work out its issues over the next couple of years. Hopefully, we'll address issues like this. And get things moving in the right direction. That's the best we can do at this moment. But ultimately, you got to point out just how extreme the other side is, and what solutions do they have? I asked my Republican friends, okay, what would you do? What are the Republicans bringing us that they would fix? More deregulation? More leave it to the mass conglomerates to do what? Gouge us more? And they don't have an answer.
Exactly.
And this is where I think we've got to keep pointing that out as well.
Right. And I have concerns too with this. If the Republicans do get the Congress back, the House back, that they're going to want to go at the Clean Water Act again.
Yeah, it's going nowhere. They can go after it all they want. It's not going to get through the Senate.
Right.
And Biden's got the veto pen. Nothing is going to happen the next 2 years coming out of the House except insanity. We've got to prepare for that. But the good thing is the work has already been done. We're going to move forward on infrastructure, on manufacturing and things are. I got some good positive vibes. But Kurt, I appreciate the call, man. Thanks so much.
All right, you have a good night, Rick.
You as well. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people from the talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1978. That was the day OSHA published its lead standard. The standard reduced the permissible exposure by 75% to protect nearly 1 million workers from damage to nervous, urinary, and reproductive systems. As early as 1908, Alice Hamilton, the mother of occupational medicine, noted that lead had endangered workers as far back as the first half century after Christ. In their book, Deceit and Denial, The Deadly Politics of Industrial Pollution, historians Gerald Markowitz and David Rosner add that throughout her distinguished career, Hamilton was deeply involved in uncovering the relationship between lead and disease in the American workforce. Hamilton's groundbreaking research on the effects of lead paved the way for a growing uproar against its continued use. After the Occupational Safety and Health Act passed in 1970, occupational and public health activists pushed hard for a lead standard. A new generation of industrial hygienists emphasized how unsound, industry-driven conclusions regarding safe lead levels impacted women workers and workers of color. Industry had long asserted that women and African Americans were simply more susceptible to lead poison, which served to justify discrimination in hiring. Some unions accepted these terms, if only to demand a stringent lead standard that included immediate implementation of engineering controls. But leading hygienists like Gene Stellman blasted these arguments. Stellman insisted such conclusions reflected racial and gender bias rather than any credible scientific evidence. She added that men, women, and children, regardless of race or ethnicity, were all adversely affected by lead exposure. The final standard adopted was considered a compromise. Discrimination in hiring has continued and enforcement proves difficult. But even a watered-down standard was too much for the lead industry. They have been fighting it ever since.
What hit the Republican Party on Election Day was, well, the Republican Party. Blow number one, of course, was from the party's president and cult boss, Donald Trump, who wields his narcissism like a political bludgeon. But then, Republicans got an even more damaging gut punch from the party's own Supreme Court majority of 6 partisan hacks. They chose this election year to assert their personal ideological view that the government should control every woman's birth decisions. Not popular. Then, like a karate chop to the party's own neck, its congressional leaders let loose with a pre-election announcement that, if put in charge, the grand old party would go after people's Social Security and Medicare benefits. But Republicans also got hit with something beyond their control. A bevy of new, unabashedly progressive Democratic candidates running on real populist issues that matter to workaday people, backed up by legions of energized grassroots activists. Candidates like Summer Lee, who will be the first black woman elected to Congress from Pennsylvania. Championed by Working Families Party, Our Revolution, and other little d Democratic groups, she beat back concerted attempts by corporate powers in both major parties that tried to demonize and defeat her, including a last-minute dump of $1 million into her GOP opponent's campaign by the American-Israeli Super PAC. Another is Lena Hidalgo, the feisty people's advocate who is the top county official in Houston, Texas. She faced down a pack of ultra-rich oil magnates, developers, and other corporate interests who put up $9 million in a failed effort to boot her. This is Jim Hightower saying grassroots progressives showed in this election a promising path to democratic rejuvenation. Run aggressive campaigns offering real change from the business-as-usual politics of both parties.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So while we were on the Working Class Heroes radio tour the entire month of October, the people who bring you the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette went on strike. The production workers went on strike on October 6th. We wanted to make it down for that, but we were in Erie that day. We were close, but not close enough. On the way back, we wanted to get through. Just didn't work out. But this is an important moment. Because these are workers who are saying, look, we produce a valuable product. Our labor is important. Our labor should be valued. And how do we decide how that value is? Well, you got to pay us decent wages, decent conditions, benefits that we can have, health security, retirement security, something along those lines. Here to share some thoughts on what's going on at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and the work that's going on there. I've asked Zach Tenner to come talk with us. Zach is an interactive designer at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He's also the president of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh. Zach, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So walk me through this. As I understand, the production workers went on strike on October 6th, and I guess everybody else on the 19th of October. What made that happen?
Yeah, so when I say the production, distribution, and advertising workers of the Post-Gazette, I'm talking about CWA mailers, pressmen, typographers, and teamsters. They produce, distribute, and sell advertising for the paper. They've been in a long contract battle, just like the Newspaper Guild has with the Post-Gazette. The issue at crux with those specific unions was healthcare. The healthcare plan that they were on was asking for increases of $19 per week per member to maintain the healthcare coverage. The Post-Gazette refused to pay that. And they also refused to allow the employees, the workers, to pay it themselves. What that ended up costing the workers was their healthcare plan entirely. They were dropped from it as of October 1st. On October 6th, they went on strike. The Newspaper Guild voted on October 17th to walk out on strike on our own unfair labor practice charges based on bad faith bargaining, unilateral impasse, and illegally imposed work rules. And that strike commenced on October 18th. So every union at the Post-Gazette has been on strike since the Newspaper Guild went on strike on October 18th.
And healthcare seems to be, everybody we talk to, healthcare seems to be that giant in the room. So they because of the contract negotiation, they lost all their healthcare and wouldn't even let the employees pay into it. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, that's right. As part of the bargaining, the Post-Gazette went to the table with these other unions that I mentioned earlier and said, we want you on the company corporate healthcare plan. And this is the plan. This is the plan that they forced the Newspaper Guild on back in summer 2020. It's a really, really expensive plan. Frankly, it's not a very good plan either. Just to give you like an example, if you're a family on the plan, in premiums alone, you could be paying $7,200 a year. That doesn't even include your deductibles or your out-of-pocket costs. Like the U.S. healthcare system, as we know, is like an atrocious nightmare. And this is like the definition of it. So we were talking about workers who were previously paying out-of-pocket maximums per year of like $4,000, having to pay us upwards of like, we're talking like $14,000, $15,000 a year. That's a major pay cut for them.
Yeah, it is a major pay cut, and major. The whole idea of having healthcare is to have security, a major shot to family security. Because who can afford a year-over-year cost of $14,000 a year in the event that you have multiple illnesses or incidents? I mean, I think of myself. Before we started our tour, my son's appendix burst, and because of my union healthcare, I didn't even cross my mind what the costs were. It was just a matter of getting him the care he needed. I can't imagine of going, geez, that's a $70,000 surgery. I now find out I'm going to have to foot, upwards of $14,000 for that. That sounds insane.
Yeah, it was really bad. And I mean, especially like I said, for the production, distribution, advertising workers who completely lost their healthcare plan. Think about continuing coverage for those folks, their families, prescription medicine, the list goes on and on. And the Post-Gazette just allowed them to be dropped from their plans for non-payment, and then didn't even allow the workers to pay those increases themselves. That was an option. The workers put that forward. All the Post-Gazette had to do to make that happen was sign one piece of paper, and they didn't do that. And those workers walked out the door on October 6th.
Now, you guys, you said the 18th, you've been on strike since then.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've had people reach out to me and say, well, hey, the newspaper industry's struggling, Rick. These workers, they've got to make concessions. I don't know, as you said, the healthcare thing, that's a massive, massive concession that I don't know that I make. What else is going on there? What's the argument what's the reverse argument of this, that the newspaper industries are sinking, they're dying, it's an antiquated system. What's the argument there?
Yeah, there's a couple of different levels to this, Rick, right? Is the newspaper industry doing as well as it did in, say, the 1940s? No, it's not. Ad sales are down, subscriptions are down. There's no way around that. But when we look at the Post-Gazette specifically, we're looking at a newspaper that is losing money year over year, but is owned by a parent company, Block Communications Incorporated, who also owns the Toledo Blade in Toledo, Ohio. This company, in gross revenue per year, makes about $500 million. And after you take out expenses, they're profitable to the tune of between $50 and $150 million per year. And so this is a parent company that can easily absorb the $10, $15 million losses that the Post-Gazette might be taking. The company refuses to open their books, so we're not really sure what that number actually is. We know it's been decreasing because the staff is less. If you have less workers, it's going to cost less to run this thing. These healthcare costs and these wage increases, which are paltry that we're asking for, frankly, are easily payable by the parent company. And the parent company and the newspaper, the Post-Gazette, have chosen to pay attorneys and strike-busting security guards and like any level of humans that they could pay that aren't the workers that produce the product.
Isn't that
and
amazing?
As one last note, like Block Communication, which was profitable to the tune between, like I said, $50 and $150 million, that entire corporation was built on the profits of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette from when newspapers were making just revenue hand over fist, before TV and the internet came and kind of monopolized some of their subscription and advertising dollars. The Block family and Block Communications are built on the Post-Gazette, and now the Post-Gazette needs a little bit of a boost and the workers need some security in the workplace. The company and the family that owns it refuse to invest that money into us.
Yeah. Well, again, every time I hear of these strikes and every time we talk to people who are on strike, it's the same MO. It's the same playbook. They bring in, strike breakers. They bring in all this security. They bring in scabs. They bring in all this stuff, and the checkbook is wide open. There's no expense too great to break your strike and to break your back and to break your family, but to pay the contract and to help make your job more secure, that a bridge too far. That's always the really interesting part of these things to me.
Yeah. Rick, it's really, really funny that you use the phrase a bridge too far, because just today we had our first bargaining session with the company since the strike commenced. And one of our demands is a really simple one. I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. Back in summer 2020, the company unilaterally declared that bargaining was over. They implemented work rules on us, and they basically nullified a lot of our decades-long contracts that were bargained, with the company and the union for a really long time. When we went to bargaining today, we said, okay, first off, you have to get rid of these imposed work rules and give us our contract back, and then we can start bargaining from there. And the phrase that the attorneys used, this high-priced, out-of-town attorney, was that's a bridge too far for us to take. So that's really, really funny that you used that phrase there, because that is straight out of the company's attorney's playbook. That is what they told the workers at the table today, giving you back just your non-economic issues. We were talking they ripped apart our jurisdiction. They took away our short-term disability banks that we had built up, all kinds of worker protections and union protections they removed. And just giving those very simple things back to us and then bargaining from there was a bridge too far for them.
So let me ask you the next logical question then, which is how much of this is truly economic? How much of this is truly about the dollars and cents? And how much of this is really about breaking the union and breaking your back? Because, when you get these union busting firms that come in, these union avoidance lawyers and these folks, these are the things that they advise. How much of it is one or the other? Do you have any thoughts? Any view?
Frankly, I think it's entirely breaking the union and breaking the workers and imposing their own will onto us. Multiple times over bargaining. Our last contract that we bargained expired in March 2017. It's been a really long time since that contract expired. It's been a long time that we've been in bargaining with the Post-Gazette. And multiple times when we've looked at their offers, their paltry wage increases, this wildly more expensive healthcare plan, the complete obliteration, like I mentioned earlier, of our short-term disability bank, we repeatedly asked the company, are you making these proposals because the company can't afford to give us raises or they can't afford to keep us on their healthcare plan? And the answer every single time was no, it's not that we can't afford it, we don't want to pay it. Essentially saying, we don't want to pay you, the workers who make our product. We want to impose our own will on you and do what we want. So I think it is entirely breaking the union and breaking the workers.
And the reason I bring this up, because the messaging out of this is really important, especially to people who don't have union protections or aren't union members, because it is that imposing of their will upon their workforce. You'll take what I'm willing to give you. What my benevolence allows you to have is what you'll get, as opposed to saying, look, my labor is worth something. I create this product. I create this paper. We deliver it. We produce it. We're the intelligence behind it. There's a value to it, and we demand part of that. They don't want any part of that. They say, you'll get what you get and you won't throw a fit, as my wife used to tell the children.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mentioned those imposed terms earlier. One thing that they did in that, they removed our arbitration clause from our contract. So even when they do impose their will on us, we still have a grievance procedure that we can follow. And the grievance procedure is essentially we file a piece of paper, they tell us to take a hike, and we have no way to move a dispute beyond that. So I think like you're exactly right. Like they want to impose their will onto us. They want it their way or the highway, to like use like an old cliched phrase, and they want no conversation in any different part of it. Like we at the bargaining table, we've had conversations with them about some of, especially like their non-economic issues, and trying to make things work for both sides. Like, okay, you want like a loosening of jurisdiction? Let's talk about how we can do that. And their response every single time is, we don't really want to talk about that. Like, this is what we want. This is what's in our proposal. We're not going to move off of this. Been like that for 5 years.
Yeah, no, again, it comes back to this is why strikes happen, unfortunately. Nobody wants one, but sometimes it's the last arrow in the quiver, and sometimes you have to do what you're doing. And good on you, good on your members, good on the people who are taking to the picket line. And I know this is a family struggle. As someone who's been on strike, I know the struggles here. We've talked to workers, for years. I know it's hard. Economically, it's hard on the family, which is why I hope folks will go to cwa.org/ppg-donate. We'll get links out on social media, how you can help throw a couple bucks to the striking workers to help them make it one day longer, so that they get a reasonable contract, that they're able to have the dignity and respect of a reasonable wage, and not them, but other people as well. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're with Zach Tanner. He's the interactive designer over at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He's also president of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh. Again, I want you to go to the website, cwa.org/ppg-donate, and throw a couple bucks to the folks there. Really, especially with the holidays coming, could be helpful and needed. So let me ask you this, because these strikes are really about community support. It's about people supporting what you're doing. What kind of response have you gotten from the good people in Pittsburgh?
The response from the community in Pittsburgh, the labor community, the elected community, the activist community, and the readers of the Post-Gazette has really been like overwhelmingly great and overwhelmingly supportive of the workers that are on strike. We wouldn't be this far into it if it wasn't. Before our bargaining session today in downtown Pittsburgh, we held a little rally in a park across the street, and we had members from the United Steelworkers outside rallying with us. We had members from other News Guild locals across the country. The president and the secretary of the Buffalo News Guild drove down to Pittsburgh to join the rally. We've had Starbucks Workers United workers come down to the picket line and bring coffee and talk to our folks who are out about what it means to be in a labor battle, what it means to be on strike. The Allegheny Fayette Labor Council, headed by their president, Darren Kelly, have been tremendous to us throughout all of this. I could keep going, but I'm going to forget people, and then those people won't be mad at me. But
no one's going to be mad at you, because we understand. The idea is to support you, because we want to help support workers, but also ultimately it's about supporting ourselves as well. If you have a successful strike and you do well, maybe that's going to tell other employers, we don't want to test this. And this is why I suggest people to go and help support the workers who are on strike today, so that we don't have to do this down the road, that employers get, because look, we're in an environment, Zach, and you know this as well as anyone. We're in an environment where you've got these labor busting attorneys who are advising these companies on how to break their unions, because it would be malpractice if they didn't, because our labor laws are so pathetically weak and the enforcement is toothless. This is why, again, politically, we need to get politicians and legislation pushed through that's going to strengthen our labor law and strengthen the rights of workers. So this is where, as a community, we've got to come together and support folks like you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I mean, things like the PRO Act are wildly important to get passed, and electing officials who have strong labor backgrounds and strong labor support is like critically important. Yeah. I'm happy that a couple folks like that won in our districts here in Western Pennsylvania in the last election just a week ago. Somebody like Chris DeLuzio, Summer Lee, those folks are going to be really critical allies, not just in our fight now, because hopefully our fight is resolved sooner rather than later. But like you mentioned, there are going to be more labor fights. That is how this goes. Labor law in America. If you haven't been entrenched in labor law in America and you get into a battle with your employer, you learn pretty quickly how pathetic it is, and how our power together, standing together, is really what gets us through this, not national labor law.
Last bit I got to get to you, because this, as anyone knows, being on strike isn't like being on vacation. You got to go out and you got to hustle, and you got to figure out how to pay the bills. You guys,
Rick, I'm working like double hours from what I was at the Post Gazette. Being on strike has doubled my work hours per week.
I know, and I give you guys credit for doing it. Good on you. But you've also started this publication of your own, unionprogress.com, the replacement paper, where we want to send folks to make sure that they check out some good news and information. Unionprogress.com. This is your publication. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so once the strike commenced, we wanted to spin up our own strike publication as an outlet that would cover the strike and also fill the news gap that the Post Gazette wasn't going to be able to fill because the reporters and copy editors and photographers and everybody else was on strike. And that's what the Pittsburgh Union Progress is. It is a worker-led publication. We're doing all of the same reporting that we do for the Post Gazette. It's just on here. In fact, that's kind of like a line I've been using. Like, don't talk to the Post Gazette. Talk to the Post Gazette reporters. It just happens to be that our work's going to appear in the Union Progress until the Post Gazette wakes up and gets us back to work.
Yeah.
I'm immensely proud of all of the work that's gone into the Union Progress. I especially love the logo for it, partially because I designed it. But no, every single piece of the Union Progress has been built by Newspaper Guild members. The CWA typographical workers who are on the line sell the ads for the Post Gazette. We're working on getting them to sell some ads in the Union Progress as well. You can find our strike donation fund, like you had mentioned earlier, on there. I just want to make a note on the strike fund. 100% of that money goes to striking workers who face economic needs while they're on strike. None of that money is going to go to like buy poster board or like pay CWA per capitas or something like that. That money's all going to strikers and their families who face economic hardships during this. All that can be found on Union Progress. Like our great photography, our great reporting, it's all on there.
Good stuff.
And hopefully the Post Gazette wakes up and realizes they want that content on postgazette.com instead. But for now, go to unionprogress.com and check out all of our great work there.
And we will get links out on social media how folks can do that. Zach, I appreciate the time. I wish you the best of luck. I want you to come back and keep us up to date on how progress is going. And hopefully this is a short strike, but one day longer, brother.
Appreciate it, Rick.
Thanks so much, Zach Tanner, interactive designer there at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on strike. He's also president of the Newspaper Guild of Pittsburgh. Check out the website, unionprogress.com, for good news and information. Got to get that. Also, if you want to make a little donation, help the folks out, cwa.org/ppg-donate. We'll get links out on social media. You can easily find it that way. Going to take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1938. That was the day that the National Federation of Telephone Workers was founded in New Orleans, Louisiana. Today, the union is known as the Communication Workers of America and represents 700,000 workers in a wide range of communication fields. Attempts to organize the telephone industry began as early as 1910 by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. By the end of the decade, the IBEW had more than 200 telephone unions. Growth in the number of union members in the telephone industry was greatly impeded due to World War I. During the war, President Woodrow Wilson issued an order to, quote, hereby take possession and assume control and supervision of each and every telegraph and telephone system, and every part thereof within the jurisdiction of the United States. He placed control of the industry under the authority of the Postmaster General. After the war ended, telephone companies increasingly installed company unions as a way to control their workers' organizing efforts. Their aim was to stave off unionism from outside organizations. Nearly all of the IBEW locals lost their membership to company unions. But when Congress passed the Wagner Act in 1935, a new surge of independent unionism began in the telephone industry. In 1938, 31 organizations organizations joined together in New Orleans to form the National Federation of Telephone Workers. It was a loose association of locally independent unions. But by 1947, it became clear that the union would have to form a strong national presence to negotiate with the nationwide companies. And the Communication Workers of America was born. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So, Jeff Bezos evidently has announced that he's going to give away a majority of his wealth. I guess, I mean, during his lifetime, I'm expecting, the Bill Gates, Warren Buffett pledge, where a lot of billionaires are going to give their wealth away upon their death. But Bezos, who has been criticized for not signing on, evidently now, according to the AP, has pledged that he's going to donate much of his gazillion dollars. And I got to wonder, does that mean going to cut down on the giant $500 million bathtub boat or the phallic-shaped rockets shooting into the air? I don't know. Now, what's interesting to me is his ex-wife, Mackenzie. She has been giving money away as fast as humanly possible, and she can't give it away fast enough because it keeps making money because there's so much. It's kind of, you ever see the movie Brewster's Million, the Richard Pryor movie back from the 80s, where he gets, sick of spending money, where Uncle Rupert, wants him to be so tired of money of spending money that he never spends anything. This is, I think, Mackenzie's, this could be the update to Brewster's Millions. This could be Mackenzie's billions. But here's one of these things, and this is where this is important. I've been saying for a while, our billionaires, they could leave a legacy. They could leave a legacy, solving hunger, ending poverty, whatever. Like Andrew Carnegie, his legacy was libraries. Spent a lot of money on libraries. Heavily, lots of philanthropy at the end of his life. No, he spent his entire life screwing workers over and, breaking strikes and doing all that stuff to amass that fortune. But at the end, trying to buy his way into heaven, I would imagine, tried to do, some philanthropic stuff. I keep coming back to, we're kind of in the same periods, that Gilded Age kind of inequality, to where you have this massive, enormous wealth in the hands of the few that eventually they're going to have to do this stuff. They're going to seek some kind of historical legacy. Whereas, during the periods of times when we had a high taxation rate, think the good socialist president Dwight David Eisenhower, where we didn't have gazillionaires, bestowing their good fortune and their benevolence upon us. We just had a system that did what we needed them to do. I argue we're in a moment right now where we need to start taxing these people. Their philanthropy aside, it's time to say, sorry, kind of late. We're going to tax it and use it in the interest of we the people, not on pet projects and on benevolence. So while it's great that, he's going to do some of this stuff, I think as a society, if we're going to be moving anywhere in the direction of equality, if we're going to have an economy that works for working people, it's got to come with a tax code that is going to say, hey, this kind of extreme wealth, something a democracy can't have. But I would love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of Bezos's commitment to give away a majority of his wealth during his lifetime? And what do you think of somebody needs to make the movie Mackenzie's Billions? Because I would like to see what she's giving away, and if she's sick of it yet. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
definitely not a Republican wave, that's for darn sure.
Missing red wave in 2022 midterms is good news for the climate. Skyrocketing levels of climate warming methane, plus...
Don't be fooled. Prop 30 is being advertised as a climate initiative.
Mixed results for environmental ballot propositions.
All of those results and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Newsom's ultimate victory is likely to be a landslide, which, since this is California, will be followed by an earthquake and a wildfire.
True story. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I'm happy to hear that the midterm elections were not a disaster for the climate. But speaking of disasters, Florida is once again in trouble.
Yes, a rare November hurricane, Hurricane Nicole, made landfall on Florida's east coast overnight Wednesday as a Category 1. Fueled by record warm ocean waters, the sprawling, slow-moving storm has brought significant rain and flooding to storm-weary parts of Florida, still damaged by deadly Hurricane Ian a month ago. President Biden has approved emergency disaster relief for the state. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration warns in a new report this week that levels of powerful climate-warming methane continue to rocket up at record rates, with concentrations now more than 160% of pre-industrial levels. A new report by the International Energy Agency reveals that globally, methane pollution from the fossil fuel industry is 70% higher than countries are officially reporting. The Global Methane Tracker also found that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency is seriously underestimating the oil and gas industry's methane pollution by as much as 70%.
What's worse, carbon or methane?
They're both really bad, but methane is a more powerful climate-warming pollutant than carbon dioxide over a shorter time period, like 20 years.
Whereas carbon stays in the atmosphere for
like hundreds of years.
Got it.
Now on to the critical 2022 midterm elections. As we go to air, we still don't know who will control the U.S. House or Senate next year, with several close races not yet decided. But the corporate media's conventional wisdom of a Republican red wave did not materialize.
Shocking.
Some notable climate-related results. Republican climate science denier Senator Ron Johnson won re-election in Wisconsin.
Boo.
Pennsylvania's Democratic Lieutenant Governor and climate hawk John Fetterman soundly defeated Trump-endorsed TV doctor Mehmet Oz.
Yay.
In the U.S. House, despite heavy gerrymandering in Republican-controlled states, voters in Ohio flipped a seat held by longtime Republican climate science denier Representative Steve Chabot, giving it to Democrat Greg Landsman. North Carolina rejected a science-denying Republican to elect Democratic climate hawk Wiley Nickel.
North Carolina did that?
Yep, and in Illinois, Democrat Eric Sorensen will be the first meteorologist in Congress in 50 years.
Really?
Climate hawks also won top state offices in major wins for climate and clean energy. Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey, who is suing Big Oil to pay for climate damages, was elected Massachusetts' first female governor.
So I presume that whoever the new AG is will continue that lawsuit?
Presumably, yes. Maryland elected climate hawk Wes Moore as its first black governor, defeating Republican climate denier Dan Cox, who was labeled one of the worst environmental candidates in the nation by the League of Conservation Voters.
And he lost.
He lost big time. In remarks on Wednesday, President Biden thanked young voters for tipping the scales with record turnout across the country in state and federal races, and he warned Republicans,
I'm not going to walk away from the historic commitments we just made to take on the climate crisis. They're not compromisable issues to me, and I won't let it happen.
Nice.
Climate advocacy groups heralded the enormous organizing effort to mobilize young voters. Nonprofit climate group Evergreen Action said that actually delivering on bold, concrete climate investments like the Inflation Reduction Act are an electoral winner. Quote, just months after passing historic climate legislation, Democrats across the country have defied historic trends and achieved one of the best midterms for a sitting president's party in recent memory. And finally, results from statewide climate and environment ballot initiatives were mixed. Voters in California appear to have rejected a proposition that would have raised taxes on millionaires to fund the transition to electric vehicles after Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom labeled it a Trojan horse giveaway to a rideshare company. Florida voters rejected a tax break for property owners that harden their properties against flooding and rising sea levels. However, New Yorkers approved a $4 billion state bond measure to upgrade the state's infrastructure against climate impacts and rising seas.
Nice. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as I said earlier, Matt Gaetz, he's saying he's not voting for Kevin McCarthy. No. And I'm kind of interested to see just how crazy things get on the Republican side. If they take the House, how crazy this speakership thing gets. And if Kevin McCarthy gets it, it's one of those things, be careful what you wish for, because he's going to inherit Marjorie Trainwreck Green, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz, Louis Gohmert. He's going to inherit a whole lot of crazy. My Congressman Scott Perry, Perry. I'm waiting to see what's going to happen. It's going to be interesting, and here to share some thoughts on maybe just how interesting. I've asked David Pepper to come talk with us. David is the former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party, also the author of the book Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Good to be back with you guys.
So what do you think? McCarthy, do you think he's going to be speaker? Do you think that's going to happen? And do you think he should really want it?
You know, I always go back that he was the heir apparent when John Boehner stepped aside. And he was literally the next in line, and they went with Paul Ryan. And I think it's part of its politics, but if you watch him much at all, he just doesn't seem to be much of a leader, honestly. Like his behavior after January 6th, he blames Trump, then he goes down and kisses his you-know-what at Mar-a-Lago. I don't know if he makes it, because I just think whenever you watch him, he just honestly seems to be lacking. You know, whatever you think about people's politics, he seems to lack some of the basics of being a good leader. And my sense is the reason they rejected him for Paul Ryan is people sort of in an honest moment knew that. And that may be, now this time it could be happening because the right and the middle, they can't figure it out. But it also may come back to the fact that this guy just doesn't seem to have the makings of a good leader. And I think as you know, if he went from blaming Trump for January 6th and desperately calling for help on January 6th, 2 weeks later doing what he's done ever since, imagine how he's going to go back and forth, as you said, between Marjorie Taylor Greene and others. And I mean, he just doesn't seem to have the spine to even know where to go or stick with one position. So I think he may not get it. And I also think he would really struggle in that role. And by the way, one other thing, like I want to win the House. I don't want them to win the House. But I do think them winning the House, they just lost because they were fully exposed as insane in places like Arizona, where Kari Lake lost, and Mehmet Oz, and just off the rails. And if they do win the House, we're going to have 2 years where these people living in gerrymandered bubbles like Jim Jordan and Matt Gaetz are on display in front of all of America, in the same way we just saw that Americans reject that exact kind of politics in Arizona, in Kansas, in Kentucky on that on the abortion referendum. So I think that we want, let's win, let's go get great stuff done. But if they win, I actually think, as you're saying, like the whole thing is going to be such a monstrosity to watch. I actually think it's going to only make their brand worse going forward.
No,
and
that's
Kevin McCarthy will not be able to solve that. It'll only get worse with him in charge as well.
no, and the fact, as you point out, the fact that he's a weak leader only is going to make that situation worse and exacerbate things for the Republican Party.
And Biden will be able to talk about a do-nothing Congress.
Right.
I mean, but do nothing in this case will be the least bad thing he could say about them, because they're going to be doing all sorts of just insane things that are the reasons they just lost. Governor's races, Senate races, Secretary of State race. I mean, they're all election deniers. And on the ballot around this country right now, in these states, election deniers lost everywhere. So I just think that it's going to, if they do win, it's going to put on display. It's going to be dysfunctional and frustrating, but it will put on display for the American people just how off the charts this group has gotten.
Yeah, and the only reason that they're competitive in the areas they are is because the game's rigged. And I look at your state of Ohio as one of the most rigged states in the country. And look, I look at what happened in Michigan. Michigan did something that a couple years ago thought unimaginable. They swept all the statewide offices and took back their House and their Senate. They haven't done that in 40 years. And Ohio seemed to go further in the insane category. Right. And what difference? What happened? These are two.
There's a lot to talk about here. Michigan managed to get themselves an independent commission to draw maps, which greatly helped them. Ohio tried that model in 2012, and it was voted down by a lot, even when Obama won. So our effort to reform gerrymandering still relied on politicians. In this case, those Republican politicians, as you know, violated the Constitution multiple times, and they were able successfully to break the law long enough that Ohioans were stuck voting on completely absurd and illegal maps. That didn't determine everything. I'll be honest. Like Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, because he responded well during COVID, he had a more moderate brand all the way through. I can point to all the ways that he's not a moderate, but to the average voter who saw him so much during COVID, who he was responsible for a few months during COVID, and that was a memory and a brand that stuck with him, and our candidate never was able to pull that away from him. So what you see in Ohio is he won by 26. Vance won by 7. It's very hard to overperform as much as to overcome a 26-point loss at the top of the ticket. Tim Ryan came damn close. But I also think what you see in Ohio, someone asked me the other day, is there a mandate? I said, well, if you're really smart and you're paying attention, the mandate was the much more moderate brand won by 26. The Marjorie Taylor Greene brand, Vance's, and the Trump brand underperformed that by, 19, 18 points. But in the end, many states, the top of the ticket dominates. And in this case, in the end, you had a mismatch where you had a very well-funded governor who felt to independents like a moderate. Right. And the moderate won. I mean, and I think that the problem for the Republicans long term, and I'm an optimist. I'm not going to say that anyone in Ohio is happy about what happened, except for our 2 congressional wins. But long term, the party in Ohio, just like it is around the country, so he just talked about, they're choosing the guy who won by 7, and the guy who won by 25 is actually the guy who they're casting aside long term. And they are choosing the extremists. And even in Ohio, look at the results. The far right guy won by 7. Mitch McConnell had to drain himself of tens of millions or more to keep that guy alive. Money that I'm sure the Arizona and Nevada Senate candidates would have loved to have had when they lost by 5,000 votes. But because Tim Ryan was taking on J.D. Vance, they had to move the money here. But in the end, the top of the ticket here, a more moderate feeling governor who's not that moderate, but he left a brand that he was, and he smartly did that. He intentionally projected a moderate, less partisan brand, and that did end up setting the tone. Now, the maps are gerrymandered. So the legislative results and the congressional results are so lopsided. They are way more lopsided than even that governor's win. Those reflect the same kind of intense gerrymandering that we see in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Texas, and frustratingly, as much as we're watching a few districts in Arizona and California, it's the gerrymandered maps in a lot of these states that is the reason if they win by a couple seats, that's going to be why they've won. And I think that to the extent we have any opportunity to finally end gerrymandering, we should go for it right now, because there's something wrong with the fact that if they win the House, it's because they got away with more attacks on districting than we did. You know, the New York Democrats basically got caught by a court.
Yeah.
And then they followed the court order. In Ohio, they got caught by a court multiple times. They just defied that court order, just like Ron DeSantis blew up the maps at the last second. The fact that the people who broke the law would get rewarded by a slim House majority is not the way we should be deciding who runs this country, but that may be what it comes down to.
Now, is there a way forward on this? I know there's the Freedom to Vote Act in the Senate. Is that going to happen in the lame duck?
I think that in lame duck, they need to smartly try. Because if the Republicans do win the House, then it's over. It's passed the House. The Freedom to Vote Act has passed the House. In the Freedom to Vote Act are provisions to stop partisan gerrymandering and discriminatory gerrymandering. So the Senate can pass this. I would say it's the most important thing they could do in lame duck. And to the extent people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema thought, well, if we don't respect the filibuster, Mitch McConnell is going to, do that against us next term. Well, he's not going to be in charge next term. We are. So the sword of Damocles, it was keeping people from actually, saying a filibuster should not be used to stop laws protecting democracy. It's gone. We know we will be in charge of the Senate. And I have one other piece of news for people. The next generation of Republicans, if they ever run the Senate, are not going to respect the filibuster if it's getting in their way. You think Josh Hawley or Tom Cotton or some of the people now speaking out against McConnell, do you think if they ever are in charge, they're going to sit around and say, we won't do anything unless 10 Democrats do? Democrats cannot, rest on our laurels. We had a big win last week, surprising results, but now is the time to go on offense, to lock in protecting democracy, and we have a month and a half to do it, and I think they should go for it. Maybe it means winnowing down the full Voting Rights Act protections that are in that, but gerrymandering especially, the idea again that they might win the House majority because they were more aggressive at breaking the law while Democrats followed the law, that's not, that is not how we should be deciding who's in charge. And the way to stop that going forward, and by the way, one other thing on this, in the next year or two, the new Ohio and North Carolina Supreme Courts, I believe, will allow a re-gerrymandering of Ohio and North Carolina to make things even worse.
Yeah.
The U.S. Supreme Court will likely rule against Voting Rights Act law as it stands today to protect against racially discriminatory gerrymandering. So they will likely have more seats, potentially even in a couple years. And how do you get ahead of that? You pass a new Voting Rights Act protection against gerrymandering before they get to this stuff to make whatever they're going to try and do in Ohio, North Carolina illegal before they do it. So we got a small window. This is one of these moments where you can get a little bold and change things for the good for a long time.
Yeah, but let me ask you.
I think it'd be a mistake to let that window close.
Well, let me ask you the other side of this. You're the lawyer here. I'm not. What you say? You pass this. What stops the Supreme Court from saying that's unconstitutional and throwing that out as well?
The Voting Rights Act is constitutional. It's basically. By the way, interestingly, in the last case, and I teach this stuff at the law school. That's why it's so top of mind. I've been teaching this for the last couple of weeks. In the last case on gerrymandering, John Roberts wrote, well, we're not going to do anything about gerrymandering, but Congress can always do something about gerrymandering. He invited Congress to actually pass laws exactly the type that are now in the Freedom to Vote Act. So they have the power to do this.
Yeah, but John Roberts is not the majority of the court.
Kavanaugh and the other conservatives signed that opinion.
Okay.
So the elections clause says to Congress, you're allowed to do things on elections. Now, of course, you have to be prepared for a court to try and screw it up. But I will tell you, I do think that they have the right to pass the Voting Rights Act. They have the right to amend the Voting Rights Act. And in theory, the Supreme Court is basically supposed to be interpreting the Voting Rights Act. So I would say make the Voting Rights Act damn clear so they can't mess with it. And it's sitting right there. Yeah. And I've always said this. I think it was a big mistake not to do this a year and a half ago. But right now we kept the Senate. But if we lose the House, then we lose the chance to do this. And we don't know when we'll get that chance again. The idea that we're going to not have a new Voting Rights Act until we get 60 votes, meaning 10 or 8 or 9 Republicans that go along with us, is insane. That's not going to happen.
Not in my lifetime.
Right. And as I write in my book, the filibuster may be a fine thing to use for other pieces of legislation. But to say a filibuster should block laws to protect democracy itself is a bad reading of the U.S. Constitution. A procedural rule should not block efforts to protect democracy itself in state after state.
I'm with you. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with David Pepper, former Ohio Democratic Party chairman, also the author of Laboratories of Autocracy, a wake-up call from behind the lines. We'll get links out on social media how you can find that. Now, your state, Ohio, again, a very rigged state, did have a couple of good wins, though. While we were in Cincinnati, your neck of the woods, on our Working Class Heroes radio tour, we ran into Greg Landsman, who had a very good night on election night, going to be the congressman from that district. But overall, not such a great night. But I think he's a shining star.
Yeah, Greg Landsman, Amelia Sykes, really impressive wins. One of the things I would tell you, we have had this nonstop struggle over fair districts. And one of the reasons both those districts were at least in range was that one of the rules that we changed in the Ohio Constitution was you can no longer split up major cities. So they no longer could split Cincinnati in half like they have for a long time. They no longer could split Akron in half. Those united cities were the base of districts that Greg Landsman and Amelia Sykes, through very good campaigns, went on to win. So the voters of our state, although we're all so frustrated as hell that the legislature is ignoring a lot of the rules, these were the non-splitting rule actually created the base of some good districts. So Amelia Sykes out of Akron, Greg Landsman, really good campaigns, great public servants. And of course, the other one, big win, was Marcy Kaptur, who is an icon in Ohio. That was a pretty Trumpy district. Long term, that's going to be a tough district to hold, but she's a great candidate, has done so much for Ohio, so much for working people in Ohio. And her opponent obviously was caught lying repeatedly about his military service, to the point where even the Republicans abandoned him. So it's the first time since 2010 that we've had 5 members of Congress from Ohio. Our delegation a couple years ago was 12-4 Republican Democrat. Now it's 10-5. So we did make a net gain. And that was a result of some reforms that we were managed to get in place and some really good candidates who ran first-rate campaigns through a lot of negative advertising thrown their way.
Yeah, we had a really good time with Marcy Kaptur in Toledo while we were there on our tour as well. And you're right. The district there was rigged, and she still came out on top, which, again, long-term is something that's going to have to be addressed. And just how they've drawn these districts and how cartoonish they are. And that's the scary part of this. I mean, they've already got the majority, but it never seems to be enough. So last line of questioning I've got for you, because ultimately Ohio's got the lame duck coming up. How insane is Ohio's lame duck going to be? What kind of craziness are we expecting?
I mean, I just think they're already so badly gerrymandered. It should scare you about, okay, what issue in districts that they're guaranteed to win are they so afraid of they've waited till after the election to bring up? That's when they bring them up. I think we could see continued attacks on voting rights. I think can see more iterations on all their culture war stuff. But here's the thing that's so puzzling to me. I mentioned earlier, Mike DeWine leaves this impression that he's a moderate. By going along with, so in many ways, it goes back to this McCarthy thing. Gerrymandering is not just a war between Democrats and Republicans. It's a war between extremists and moderate Republicans. Gerrymandering in states like Ohio have made the moderate Republicans disappear. It's all extremists now. And what's incredible about Mike DeWine this is true for both lame duck, but also next year, he just gave the extremists in the legislature a supermajority that can override his vetoes. So the guy just won by 25 points, and he's totally irrelevant. He has given the state over more than ever to a group of people who don't have their own elections to worry about. Their only incentive is to be extremists. And if he doesn't agree with him, they don't even care. Wow. So both in lame duck and for the next 4 years, this guy who wants to look like a moderate, his legacy will be he turned the state over to extremists in districts that they can't lose. And his second term as governor, I think the highlight happened 6 days ago. And I think it's going to go downhill very quickly between a corruption trial in January and just a downward spiral into more and more extremism, starting with lame duck, but continuing on with the legislature who can override his veto on anything they want to. He's the most irrelevant 25-point winner you're ever going to see.
Wow. Going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But David, I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
Thank you. Good talking to you.
David Pepper, former chairman of the Ohio Democratic Party. Also, make sure you check out his book, Laboratories of Autocracy. We'll get links out. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Quick break, right back.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, there are days when I really hate the New York Times. Honestly, they had an article talking about John Fetterman and how much, Fetterman's every county, every vote campaign really made a difference. I've been saying this for years. You've got to get into rural communities. You got to compete. You got to run on your ideas, because the reality is progressive policies are extraordinarily popular. So they are. We were in Iowa. Where you were talking to people there who said, look, Iowa used to be a strong, moderate Democratic state. The farmers were strong Democrats. Moderates, but strong Democrats, farmers, farmers co-ops, farmers union, that kind of stuff. You would argue almost socialist to a point, and have been totally radicalized because Democrats and the left have abandoned them, have made them the butt of jokes in some cases. So when I see the New York Times saying, an explanation for, Fetterman doing well and doing much better than Biden in red counties is because he freaking talked to them, you go, duh, hello. You've got to build these relationships. And Fetterman has done that his entire career. And this is where, again, my Democratic Party leader friends, there are rural voters who want your message. There are policies that need to happen. The broadband thing, huge for rural America. You should be out there saying, look what we're doing. We're bringing you something the other guy never thought of, never was going to do. Again, it comes down to what are you going to do for people? How are you going to make their lives better? And you got to get in there and, stop treating them as they're stupid and run on your policies. Because again, progressive policies are extraordinarily popular, even if progressives are not. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, always remember the podcast. You can download the podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts, or just go to thericksmithshow.com and get it there. Make sure you share it with your friends, your coworkers, especially that Trumpy guy down the street. Might be good for him. Quick break, right back.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1938. That was the day that the National Federation of Telephone Workers was founded in New Orleans, Louisiana. Today, the union is known as the Communication Workers of America and represents 700,000 workers in a wide range of communication fields. Attempts to organize the telephone industry began as early as 1910 by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. By the end of the decade, the IBEW had more than 200 telephone unions. Growth in the number of union members in the telephone industry was greatly impeded due to World War I. During the war, President Woodrow Wilson issued an order to, quote, hereby take possession and assume control and supervision of each and every telegraph and telephone system, and every part thereof within the jurisdiction of the United States. He placed control of the industry under the authority of the Postmaster General. After the war ended, telephone companies increasingly installed company unions as a way to control their workers' organizing efforts. Their aim was to stave off unionism from outside organizations. Nearly all of the IBEW locals lost their membership to company unions. But when Congress passed the Wagner Act in 1935, a new surge of independent unionism began in the telephone industry. In 1938, 31 organizations joined together in New Orleans to form the National Federation of Telephone Workers. It was a loose association of locally independent unions. But by 1947, it became clear that the union would have to form a strong national presence to negotiate with the nationwide companies. And the Communication Workers of America was born.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
What hit the Republican Party on Election Day was, well, the Republican Party. Blow number one, of course, was from the party's president and cult boss, Donald Trump, who wields his narcissism like a political bludgeon. But then, Republicans got an even more damaging gut punch from the party's own Supreme Court majority of 6 partisan hacks. They chose this election year to assert their personal ideological view that the government should control every woman's birth decisions. Not popular. Then, like a karate chop to the party's own neck, its congressional leaders let loose with a pre-election announcement that, if put in charge, the grand old party would go after people's Social Security and Medicare benefits. But Republicans also got hit with something beyond their control. A bevy of new, unabashedly progressive Democratic candidates running on real populist issues that matter to workaday people, backed up by legions of energized grassroots activists. Candidates like Summer Lee, who will be the first black woman elected to Congress from Pennsylvania. Championed by Working Families Party, Our Revolution, and other Little D Democratic groups, she beat back concerted attempts by corporate powers in both major parties that tried to demonize and defeat her, including a last-minute dump of $1 million into her GOP opponent's campaign by the American-Israeli Super PAC. Another is Lena Hidalgo, the feisty people's advocate who is the top county official in Houston, Texas. She faced down a pack of ultra-rich oil magnates, developers, and other corporate interests who put up $9 million in a failed effort to boot her. This is Jim Hightower saying grassroots progressives showed in this election a promising path to Democratic rejuvenation. Run aggressive campaigns offering real change from the business-as-usual politics of both parties.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So last week we talked briefly about the Biden administration releasing the 9/11 interview with Bush and Cheney, declassifying that, and some of the information that came out of it, especially about Trump his stance on the Saudis, on Cheney's reaction to the downed United plane. There's a lot in there. Now, my first thought was, I really want to know, I don't know, all of the stuff that was told to the people in Congress. Can we declassify that now? And the first person I thought of, well, was my next guest, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So did you see this declassifying of this interview?
Right, and they were revealing that Bush told Cheney he could shoot down planes. Now, I don't know, how much more is to come? Do you know?
I don't, and this is where I defer to you as the expert on this, because you have said over the years, and this has been something we've talked about often, that you wish you could reveal all of that stuff, and I want you to reveal all of that stuff, and you never have. Just if the FBI's listening or anybody else, you've never given me any. I've wanted it. I've begged for it.
I've hinted, but no, I didn't say anything, right?
No, because look, this is serious stuff. But ultimately, we're far enough away. It's time to now know what was presented. It's time to open that up and clear that history up, in my view.
Well, you're right. When for quite a few years, I did it on your show and other stations. I used to talk also about the classified report on 911, that it should be released. It should be released. Finally they did, because I wanted to say about Saudi involvement, and then of course they said, well, that was checked out, and believe that, and I've got something I can sell you. It wasn't thoroughly checked out, but it was in that commission report. Now this, and I agree, it's something that has just bugged and irritated me for years. I hope others that were there when I was, and to me, we will repeat history as a mistake unless, in fact, we know what those people said, why they said it. Was it wrong? Did they interpret something wrong, or did they make it up?
Yeah.
And again, we were all given this information, shown these things, and it led to me and others. I'm sure that's why they made the same decision to say, yes, give Bush full faith and ability and security to do whatever he needs to do.
Yeah. Now, I've been told by a number of people, off the record, privately, that had I seen what you saw, had I been presented, there was no question I would have voted the same way that everyone else did. As much as I'm anti-war and afraid of the powers and all that, they say, no, look, if you would have seen what we saw, there's no question you would have gotten in line.
I tell people that all the time. If you'd been sitting there with me and you saw what I saw, you most likely would have also voted in that way, because John Kerry voted that way, Hillary Clinton. I can go down a list of names both sides of the aisle, right? Yeah. And it's because we were shown this. Now, either those people that stood down there on the floor of the House, either those people, again, they outright lied, or they misinterpreted information, or they were given wrong information, or it was a combination of both. And why do we not know? Why can we not say, how does it hurt the nation to say, here's what they said? Because we now know it was not true. Whether it was made up, inaccurate, it wasn't true.
Right. No, and again, I'm a transparency guy. I understand the moment you need to have some secrecy. You don't want to give things away to your enemies, but we're 20 years away from that. It's time to open these books up and hold ourselves accountable for what happened. At least that's my thought, and I hope people are pushing for this as well. But this kind of came out of the blue, didn't it? I mean, this declassification. Were you expecting this?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yes, I'm kind of wondering what the reasoning, what the rationale was. I mean, we still have problems with the Saudis, Mr. Bonesaw and all them. One of the things that did come out is, I have to say it appears Bush had a little bit greater understanding of the geopolitics of the region when he said, the monarch is not a monolith. I kind of, okay, yeah, the Saudi royal family is not a monolith. That shows some bit of understanding.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see, and we got to keep pushing for it. The other thing today, the big news for me that I had to get to you lived in Iran for a number of years. There's turmoil. There's protesters rising up. But I saw the headline that the regime is talking about executing 15,000 protesters. I'm curious your thoughts.
The regime has grown powerful, and it was as a result, which it helped it, was to cancel the Iran nuclear deal, which in fact went then from a moderate government, we'll call it moderate, but it was in
as moderate as Iran can be.
Right, and they did the nuke deal, and then they all were criticized because then it was canceled by Trump. The clerics were given a lot of power, and then the new election came up, and the clerics won, top to bottom in the election process. So what you have sitting there is a quote parliament and a president and the supreme leader, which are all cleric controlled for the most time now since the revolution that they've had this kind of extremism, in the government, and now they've put forth this proposal that's become law where they can kill, up to 15,000 of these protesters, including the age of 9 years old. And there was even a provision, they can't kill a virgin, so they would marry her where she would be basically raped, and then, of course, then they could kill her. I mean, this is how bad, this is. And, I lived in Iran during the revolution of the Shah, and I've watched this unfold for years. I've been part of the Clinton and Bush administration with other members, both sides of the aisle, including now President Biden, in trying to communicate and reach out. Now it's reached a new level, and if they would dare to do this, to execute, from 9 years old up, and that amount of people, I do think this would be a no turn back point for the people of Iran, and I think this would be the final straw if they would go forward with this. But to actually say they're going to do it is unbelievable, that they would put forth this now piece of law that they can execute 15,000 people for simply protesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching the protests growing, and right. Some of the stories of even some of the military people siding with the protesters has been played up. How are you viewing these as someone who lived there? I mean, I'm only getting bits and pieces from the outside. Do you have any insight of what's going on and how this is playing out?
Yes, this has gone beyond what we know were pretty serious protests called the Arab Spring, which went through the Arab world, came and went. This one was different, and at first, when it starts, the problem that the Iranians have is they don't have a central force to collate behind. For example, when the revolution was going on against the Shah, then they had the new Islamic government, which said it was going to bring freedom because of the abuses of the Shah of Iran and his government. So people were collated behind that, the Ayatollah Khomeini and the Islamic, quote, freedom fighters, which they thought were freedom fighters at that time. This time is a little bit different. The Shah's son lives in Virginia. He's in exile. He's really not somebody they would follow. He's not even interested in particular of having a kingdom, a type of monarchy anyway. And then there's the Mujahideen Khalq, who a lot of Iranians from all walks of life can't stand. It's a group based out of Paris. So there's no real, entity to get behind. However, even without that kind of leadership, this has spread to all the provinces of Iran, and it was instituted by women, which is amazing because they're treated so badly over there and so poorly, and they have no real citizen class per se. But it's done itself up through the ranks with the women, and it went through the school systems. I mean, this one really was widespread. Now, when it first began, I said, well, it's not going to be a revolution, but probably some change would come. That's what I thought. Now, the clerics have become even, more hardline and more dangerous to the people than they've ever been. So I think, Rick, that this has the real potential to, the protesters are going to defy the regime. Even if 15,000 people face death, they are going to now defy the regime. I think the regime has taken a step that, if it follows through with executions, this may lead to a revolution of the people in Iran. Of course, Iran, the clerics will blame the United States and Israel for this, but the Iranian people don't buy that.
And of course, it's going to inflame other situations where they're going to rattle sabers and cause international strife as well. At least that's what I'm expecting. Is that reasonable?
Well, I think it's reasonable because, again, the only thing that the clerics have to hang on to is outside forces are doing this to you.
Yeah, the evil Satan.
It's the foreigners doing this to you.
Yeah,
which isn't true, and that's all they've got to hang on to. So yes, they may institute something. I mean, look, before when there was a weakness, Iran went to war with Iraq to galvanize the people. But no matter what they do, it's not going to galvanize people. They have really taken steps beyond what I ever thought they would go to.
Yeah, I saw the stories. And I'm like, this is insane.
It's terrible.
And we're from the outside helpless to do anything.
Right.
Because then, any action, at least this is my thought, any
Correct.
action from us would be that rationale, for going even further because we are viewed as the evil Satan.
Right. If we or Israel would do anything directly, to Iran, the clerics would be able to basically, turn it and try to use it to their favor. I mean, they've been so hideous in this entire process. You would think, well, that won't work, but they would try to galvanize the people or a part of them. Yeah, there needs to be no foreign intervention in this one. Nate, we just need to support them. People need to speak out and tell the atrocities that are happening. But within Iran, this has to ferment there. I just think this time the clerics have went absolutely too far, and there's going to have to be some type of change, or there may very well be a revolution in Iran. The oil workers were supporting the people, in parts of the military. Same thing happened with the Shah when he had crackdowns. When I was there, they were shooting people in the streets. If you protested, they came out and shot them down. And pretty soon the military started to turn on the Shah himself.
History, unfortunately, possibly repeating itself. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Bob Ney, former Ohio congressman, political analyst. I also wanted to get your thoughts on Taiwan. I saw this story that Congress is trying to arm Taiwan quickly. That's what the Washington Post is reporting. I'm hearing words that China is expecting to attack Taiwan. Some of the military people I know that they're telling me that some things are being moved around, getting people into certain places because there's a heightened expectation. Any thoughts?
Well, I think if we look at the invasion of the Ukraine, probably kind of maybe we are learning something off of it, I guess. But the Congress is trying to arm and train Taiwan, and give them some type of step up. This will be probably the largest package of assistance and that we've done in our history with Taiwan since it's been there to try to help them out. And this will be Republican and Democrat. The effort will be together on a bipartisan basis. And again, I think we're trying to learn from what happened with the Ukraine to do something, in advance. I don't think it is a move that will hurt. I think that at least it will send a message that we're going to be there. Our president just met with the premier. I won't call him President Xi. I just can't. But the premier of China. And as far as that meeting, it was a tiny move, but the two did communicate. And President Biden, although the details aren't all released, we know, obviously didn't beat around the bush with the issue of Taiwan. he went, right to the point with Xi.
Yeah. Now, do you foresee? I mean, I think back to, I remember the story of Eisenhower sent the Pacific Fleet to basically surround Taiwan. Do you see us taking that kind of intervention, that kind of action?
I think that I don't know that how aggressive we'll become in a sense of, immediately getting into the, quote, face or what China considers its territory. But, we've made it clear in the past we still will do military drills, so I think we'll do that. China has stepped up all these military maneuvers in the waters and, and in the sky around Taipei, Taiwan. And we have made certain pretty historic steps. Speaker Pelosi's trip, which I thought was a great trip, going over, helped. And then our president, standing up for Taiwan, making it clear that we were there for the long haul. Maybe this will help to avoid what happened with Ukraine, and it might also involve a no-fly zone in particular if it gets down to it. So I think that the maneuvers are not going to make China any worse on this subject. I think, if anything, it may give them some hesitation about just going in and taking Taiwan.
Do you think it's inevitable that they're eventually going to take Taiwan?
Well, they may do it in a different way. Right now, China is this communist, capitalist cash cow type of attitude. It did with Hong Kong. It looked that way, and with Taiwan. It's a communist country, but it's got this kind of hybrid system and the need for capitalism, and it's having trouble in its economy. So it's possible that it may not want to disrupt Taiwan totally, and this might be enough of a pushback by us in many ways, and we should have partners from other countries to help us, which I think we will. And then I think it'll really maybe make China not make the move that it would as an aggressive military move, but China will still continue probably to do what it did with Hong Kong, which was to not disrupt the Taiwan economy and eventually try to take it over.
Yeah, don't disrupt the business. Not the cash flow.
Oh, no.
Leave the cash flow coming.
They're a commie capitalist country now.
There you go. They're greedy. They want the power and control, but the greed's still there. I get it.
Of course.
We'll see where this plays out. But Bob, as always, great stuff. Look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Oh, thank you, Rick. Our
good friend, former Ohio Congressman Bob Ney. Look, there's a lot of craziness going on, and what's interesting is I think Bob hit it right on the head. Especially in Iran, when you walked away from that nuclear deal, one of Trump's great accomplishments made that region less safe, because you gave the crazies what they wanted. We'll take a quick break. Right back. Remember, you miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Wherever you get yours, you'll find ours. Also, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. Working women from around the nation founded the National Women's Trade Union League in Boston. The organization's founders included female reformers, working-class women, as well as women from wealthy families. The purpose of the organization was to assist in the organization of women wage workers into trade unions, and thereby to help them secure conditions necessary for healthful and efficient work and to obtain a just reward for such work. One of the inspirations for the Women's Trade Union League was the work of Settlement House organizer Jane Addams. The Women's Trade Union League recognized that women across economic classes were united by what they called the bonds of womanhood. Wealthy league members donated money to the cause. They often served as spokeswomen and arranged for legal representation for workers when necessary. When the league was founded, the trade union movement was male-dominated.
The male trade unionists worried more women in the labor market would drive down men's wages. Often union leaders were unwilling to allow women into their ranks. The Women's Trade Union League was one of the primary organizers of female garment workers, particularly in New York City and Chicago. The League was a key supporter of the 1909 New York City Shirtwaist Workers' Strike, also known as the Uprising of 20,000. The League was also a vocal advocate for the women's suffrage movement. The Women's Trade Union League disbanded in 1950, and in 1974, the Coalition of Labor Union Women was founded in Chicago to continue the fight to ensure women have a voice in the labor movement. However, women workers still earn about 80 cents on the dollar compared with men. The work of the Women's Trade Union League remains unfinished. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email rick@thericksmithshow.com. It looks like we're going to hit as a globe sometime tomorrow. They're guessing sometime tomorrow we're going to reach 8 billion people on this planet. In fact, it took 12 years to get from 7 billion to 8 billion. And I'm not quite sure how they calculate exactly when we hit that 8 billion. I guess it's got to be a pretty sizable margin of error maybe. But 8 billion people. Now they're estimating that the next billion is going to take a little bit longer, which they're saying is a sign that the population growth is slowing. Pandemic kind of does that a little bit. But they're saying it's going to take 15 years till 2037 to get to the next billion. And you go, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people, sucking up a lot of resources, a lot of water, a lot of food, a lot of everything. And you think about, I keep thinking about what's going on with us and China and all of the turmoil on this planet. Could we not use resources a lot better than bombing each other? I mean, isn't there a better way to use? I know, you sound like a socialist. Yeah, I've heard that before. Because I dare to think that, feeding people is better than killing them. Giving them homes and a place to live, probably a lot better than blowing up their homes. Just kind of a thought. But I found it interesting that, tomorrow, officially tomorrow, we will live to see 8 billion people on the planet. Wow. Also today, some information came out that, again, we knew the Trump administration. We knew Trump while in office was making huge amounts of money. Some officials, according to the New York Times, again, I sometimes hate the New York Times, but according to their reporting, countries like Malaysia, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Turkey, China, spent massive amounts of money on the Trump International Hotel, what they're saying at critical times in 17 and 18. And you go, that quid pro quo kind of thing, we're spending a whole bunch of money in your hotel. And I was looking at one of the billing, and like $1,800 for breakfast for the staff, and a couple $1,000s for the rooms, and then there's a line for, if it was just like a nondescript line for like $250,000. And you go, how do you go from $1,800 for breakfast, $60 for tax, to $250,000 for this unnamed service? And it just seemed to me, when you look at this stuff, as a payoff, as currying favor, if you will. And this is what I've always said about the right. It is about a patronage system, and this for working people is dangerous because you don't have the money. You can't buy the access and influence. But are you surprised? And as I was reading through this, am I surprised that people were seeking influence with the administration by staying in his rooms that were going for like $10,000 a night? No, not surprised at all, because it's exactly what we expected, isn't it? And in 2 years, if he becomes president again, I shouldn't use the handcuffs. The cuffs will be off and the grift will expand. But here again, it's something we've got to pay attention to. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find yours, you will find ours, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, and everywhere in between. Appreciate you tuning in. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people